Welcome back to Southeast Texas Weekly, and let it never be said we failed to argue long and hard enough about politics here in Southeast Texas. Joining me to do more of the same, Shane Howard on the right, Jefferson County Tax Assessor Collector.
Hi, Kevin.
And Kent Woolston, a prominent attorney in our city, a gentleman, a scholar. Good to see you, Mr. Woolston. Sitting in the center. In the center tonight. All right, give us a quick word here. The budget has become a morass of rhetoric. Yeah. Southeast Texans call our newsroom on a regular basis and say, well, what's going on? There's a serious problem in Washington where we can't get beyond a continuing resolution to keep the government running. 100 days into the Republican leadership in the House, we still have this. And on the right there were calls of this is going to be a new day. This is a new House. It's a new day. Has it become a new House?
Well, it's a better House than it was. We've got about $40 trillion in cuts for the 2011. Well, there wasn't a budget, just 2011 spending. The previous Congress did not pass a budget. They chose not to. They volunteered not to, and only the second time, I believe, since the 1960s.
They volunteered not to? They volunteered last fall. The president could have worked out a scenario and kept the government, got the budget worked out last fall. What happened?
Well, he could have, and he didn't. And
why didn't he?
I don't know. I wish he would have. I wish he'd have given some leadership in that area. I'm disappointed in the president for not passing a budget. We had the Democrat majority, and so we should have pushed a budget.
They could have, yeah, I'm sorry, they could have passed it without a single Republican vote. So nothing was holding them up except the election. They did not want to show what was actually in there. And so they waited, and so we've had continuing resolution land ever since.
Speaking of which, the president is all about Campaign 2012, if you believe some of his critics. They say that this speech this past Wednesday called for $1 trillion in new taxes on the wealthy. Was rife with campaign rhetoric. It sounded like a stump speech from those who followed the president most closely in this past election. They say it sounded like his stump speech. Has the president begun campaign 2012?
I think it's eerily familiar to the campaign. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. Look, the bottom line is, and Shane and I really agree on this point, Democrats and Republicans have put us in this situation. Both parties have done it. Now it's time to come together, like Clinton did I believe in '94, and work with the Congress to bring this deficit down. And it's not only rich Americans that are going to have to pay more. We're all going to have to pay more. Nobody likes to hear it. But this is trillions and trillions of dollars that's owed. The dollar is the reserve currency for the world. What happens if we default?
Southeast Texans want solutions. They want things worked out.
Exactly, and I agree. Both Democrats and Republicans. In fact, Kent and I were talking about in the 2000s we actually did spend. But there isn't a difference in philosophy. This is not both philosophies caused this to take place, and there is where the difference is. Republicans failed during the 2000s because they didn't act in philosophically consistent with their value system. We don't have a revenue problem. Revenues have increased year after year after year for the last 30 to 40 years.
Well, that's what
spending has increased exponentially
under both parties.
Under both parties during that same time frame. So we have a spending problem, and the president is definitely doing a stump speech because he comes back to this whole revenue deal and goes after once again, and I hate the phrase, but it's accurate, class warfare. The top what is a fair share? The top 1% of wage earners in this country bear 38% of the burden. The top 10% pay 70% of all the taxes collected.
Another extraordinary point that
when will we be satisfied?
A new poll came out.
There's not enough rich men to take from.
In this new poll, 60% of Americans say that they agree with this statement. What we pay in taxes does not match up with what we get from government. It's a bad deal. What we pay in taxes, what we get from government in services, it's a bad deal. 60% of Americans agree with that statement. How do you reverse that situation, Kent?
Well, I agree with that statement, too. I mean, if you look at how much we pay in each year, I'm a business owner. And Shane's been a business owner, and it's a large percentage of my profit that I have to pay in taxes, and I don't get anything back in return. However, I will say that we do a lot in this country for the elderly, for children, and that has to continue. And if it means me paying more, I'll pay more.
What about the defunding of Planned Parenthood? What about this budget that is taking broad steps to trim the budget?
It's time to trim the budget. If it means defunding NPR radio and Planned Parenthood, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, and when we think about it, especially Planned Parenthood, especially some of the services that they do provide that might be culturally legitimate, those are already done by Medicare anyway and Medicaid. I want to go back to, I didn't answer your question earlier about the 38 to 40 billion in real cuts. Those are real cuts. Were they what they should have been? Absolutely not. But if you look at the fight, it's an illustration of what we have coming up ahead of us. It represents 1 cent on every dollar of actual spending for 2011, and you saw what happened. We were called names. We were told that we were going to kill old people.
Death
that we
battles.
didn't. You know, we had a congresswoman saying that we were trying to kill women, and we were talking about 1 penny on every dollar. When we have a significant problem that's going to require us to cut spending by a good 10 to 20 cents per dollar. Right now, this current year, $3.5 trillion. If you divide that by the 308 million Americans here in this country, that's $12,000 per person. My family of 4, the federal government could write a $48,000 check, and I could probably spend it better than the $48,000 per year that they're spending on our behalf that the top 10% are paying 70% of the load on.
And to go back to Congressman Ryan's plans, I mean, some of his ideas are not ideologically that far away from that. Example,
No,
the
absolutely
Medicaid.
not.
Just
They're
give
not,
it to the states.
But he wants to block grant that to the states, and that's going to mean for elderly people, for women that have, you know, elderly women. My mother had breast cancer, and without Medicaid, Medicare, it would have been a travesty for our family. That's going to cut a lot of that out. It's going to limit how much these block grants that the state can actually apportion to each person.
But it'll create some efficiencies, though, and drive them into the marketplace, and the marketplace will adapt to it when they know that they've got a customer base that they can adjust for risk.
People are going to suffer because of that. Older people, older Americans are going to suffer. I don't want older Americans or children suffering in this country.
I don't either, but where we disagree is on what is the best possible way to solve that. And what I don't want us to do is burden the entire country with the same program to handle a small minority that we do need to take care of, but to say that then to scale that out to the entire population, that's what some of these healthcare schemes do.
And that's the question we'll pick up after this break on Southeast Texas Weekly. This matter of Republican leadership and some plans that seem to some as if they're mean-spirited towards the elderly and other disadvantaged groups. That and more coming up in a moment on Southeast Texas Weekly.